He walked into the forest and never came back. Not because he was lost, not because something drove him out, because he chose it, with a clarity most people never find about anything. For 27 years, no one knew where he was. What they didn't know was whether the silence he chose was freedom or another kind of burial. There is a place in central Maine where the trees grow so dense that even deer won't pass through them. The locals call it the Jarsey. It is not a place you stumble into. It is a place that swallows you whole, and it holds its secrets like stone holds cold, long after the source of the chill has gone. Christopher Knight grew up in Albion, Maine, a town so small it is less a place than a gravitational suggestion. A few thousand people, some modest farms, roads that thin into gravel, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace so much as an agreement not to speak. He was born in December of 1965, the fifth of 6 children, 4 older brothers and a younger sister, in a family that was, by all accounts, decent and stable and utterly unremarkable. His mother kept a greenhouse. His father kept to himself. The Knight household was not unhappy. It was simply not a place where the interior life was examined out loud. From the time he was small, Christopher was what people politely called a loner. At school, he was sharp, attentive, quick with information. But he had no particular interest in the rituals of adolescence, the noise of parties, the performance of friendship, the need to be witnessed by your peers. He found other people exhausting in a way he could not explain, not because he disliked them, but because their company demanded something from him that he did not have to give and was not sure he wanted to find. He graduated from Lawrence High School in Fairfield, attended Sylvania Technical School, and by his early 20s had landed a job in the Boston suburb of Waltham installing alarm systems, a man paid to understand how locks work, how sensors fail, where the gaps are in the systems we build to protect what we love. The job was fine, the apartment was fine, the life was, by every legible metric, fine. And that fineness was its own kind of slow suffocation. One afternoon in 1986, Christopher Knight was 20 years old. He finished a day of work and got in his Subaru. He drove south through Massachusetts, through Rhode Island, into the long, flat highways of the eastern seaboard, all the way down to Florida. Then, without explaining himself to anyone, because there was no one to explain himself to, he turned around. He drove north. He did not call his employer to resign. He did not call his mother. He did not stop to think about what he was doing with the careful deliberateness of a man making a decision. He simply drove, the way a stone simply falls. He drove back through Maine, through Albion, through his own childhood geography, past the modest 50 acres where his family still lived. He kept going north, onto rougher roads, dirt roads, roads that stopped being roads. When the car ran out of gas, he got out. He had a tent. He had never spent a night in one. He had no map, no plan, no destination. He said later, with the flat economy of a man describing something that required no elaboration, "I just walked away." He was never reported missing. His family, baffled and eventually resigned to their bafflement, assumed he had gone to New York. None of them knew that the woods of central Maine, less than an hour's drive from where they lived, had taken him in. And for 27 years, it kept him. The camp he eventually built was not far from North Pond, a body of water flanked by summer cabins where families came each year to boat and fish and eat easy meals on screened porches. Knight settled himself into a hollow in the Jarsey, inside a cluster of glacial boulders so dense and disorienting that you could walk 20 yards away and see nothing. He moved everything off the ground onto wooden pallets to stay dry. He strung tarps with the precision of a sailor. Over years, he accumulated a camp stove, a radio, sleeping bags layered and nested like Russian dolls, a magazine rack, a folding chair, a reading lamp. He stole all of it. Every single item in his home came from the cabins around North Pond, taken in the small hours of the morning, while the families who owned them slept. or in winter, while their chairs sat empty and their fires went cold. He burglarized those cabins roughly 1,000 times over 27 years, 40 raids a year on average. He took food, canned beans and chocolate bars, and marshmallow fluff and El Monterey chimichangas. And he took batteries and propane and clothing and books and magazines. He never broke a lock. He knew how to find the unlocked window, the door with the weak latch, the back entrance no one bothered to secure. He left no fingerprints. He left, he claimed, no footprints, stepping only on roots and stones and the frozen surface of the ground. He was a ghost made of need, and for most of those 27 years, the people of North Pond could not prove he was real. They named him the North Pond Hermit. Some left notes on their doors asking him not to break in, promising to leave supplies out. He never answered. Some believed he was a myth. And the winters came, and the winters went, and Christopher Knight sat alone in his chair among the boulders and read and thought, and became something that is very hard to name. What is a hermit? The word carries with it the weight of centuries, the dust of desert caves and monastic silence, and men who chose God over the world. Christopher Knight was not religious. He had no doctrine, no practice, no name for what he was doing. He did not romanticize solitude in the way of Thoreau, who had guests at Walden Pond and took his laundry home to his mother. Knight did not go to the woods to write. He went to the woods to disappear, and what he found in the disappearing was not transcendence. It was something quieter and stranger, a version of himself that could only exist in the total absence of everyone else. He endured Maine winters without fire. He was afraid of smoke, afraid of the thin column of gray rising above the tree line that would tell someone exactly where to find him. Instead, each winter morning at 2:30 in the morning, not at dawn, not at a civilized hour, but at 2:30 when the cold was at its most absolute, he climbed out of his sleeping bags and paced the perimeter of his clearing. Back and forth, in darkness so complete that the stars looked like they had been nailed there. He melted snow on a little camp stove to make drinking water. He moved to keep the blood from thickening in his limbs. He did not do this because he was brave. He did it because stillness in that cold meant death, and death was the only thing he hadn't chosen. Think about what that means. Imagine waking at 2:30 in the morning in a temperature that makes your breath into a living thing, visible and desperate, knowing there is not another person on earth who knows where you are, knowing that warmth is something you cannot allow yourself, knowing that the only way through the night is to walk, and keep walking, in a circle of your own making, in the dark, alone. That was every winter, 27 of them. He became, over those years, something that no study of survival psychology had quite accounted for. He moved through the Jarzy without sound, navigating by memory and instinct, able to cover ground that even experienced woodsmen found impassable. He did not hunt or fish. He found those things unnecessary when there were cabin pantries within a mile. He read voraciously, philosophy, history, novels, whatever the families of North Pond had left on their shelves. He listened to the radio at night, absorbing the outside world like a man watching a fire through glass, present to it, but not of it. He thought. About what, he did not readily say. About everything, about nothing. About the specific quality of silence in the woods before snow, about the way the birch trees looked in October, about what it meant to be a self when no one was watching. He was not unhappy. This is the part that defies the expected narrative. He was not a broken man hiding from wounds. He was not running from a specific trauma. He was, in some fundamental and perhaps untranslatable way, exactly where he needed to be. The solitude did not hollow him, it clarified him. He emerged from 27 years with opinions, with humor, with a vocabulary for experience that most people, People who had spent those same years building careers and marriages and credit scores would struggle to match. He had read more. He had thought more. He had been more continuously and honestly himself than almost anyone he would eventually encounter. But the world does not leave a man alone forever, even one who has earned the right to be left alone. If you're enjoying this story, check out Christopher Knight's full journey in the description. Sergeant Terry Hughes had been tracking the North Pond hermit for the better part of a decade. He was a Maine game warden, meticulous and patient, and he took the burglaries personally, not because of the food and the batteries and the stolen propane, but because of what the fear did to the families who kept coming back to their summer cabins year after year with a new unease, a new awareness that something was watching them. He set motion detector cameras around the Pine Tree Camp, a facility on North Pond that served children and adults with disabilities. He watched the footage. He waited. On the night of April 4th, 2013, Christopher Knight walked out of the woods for the last time as a free man. He was 51 years old. He was wearing Land's End jeans, size 38, cinched with a brown leather belt, and he was carrying a backpack full of stolen food from the Pine Tree Camp kitchen. Hughes was waiting for him in the dark. Knight did not run, he did not fight. He stood there in the beam of the flashlight, and something in his face, which Hughes described as simultaneously terrified and, beneath the terror, almost relieved, said more than anything he would say out loud for months. He was arrested, charged with burglary and theft, transported to the Kennebec County Correctional Facility in Augusta. For the first time in nearly 10,000 nights, he slept indoors. The jail was louder than anything he had encountered in living memory, not just in decibels, but in density. The proximity of other bodies, other voices, other people's needs pressing against his nervous system from every direction. He could not eat at first. The food was nothing like what he had chosen for himself in the darkness of the cabins, and the act of eating in a room full of other people was its own kind of violence. He sat in the day room and held himself very still and looked at the floor and tried to survive the noise the way he had survived the cold, by choosing, one breath at a time, not to break. 500 journalists tried to reach him. He refused everyone. Then a handwritten letter arrived from a journalist named Michael Finkel, who had his own history of being cast out, fired from the New York Times for fabricating elements of a story, which was its own kind of vanishing act, its own kind of waking up in a world that had closed around you. Something in Finkel's letter must have registered. Knight wrote back. And over 9 hour-long conversations in the Kennebec County Jail, conversations in which he was eloquent and combative and funny and evasive and precise, often within the same sentence, Christopher Knight began to speak. What came out was not a confession. It was not an apology. It was closer to a translation. A man with no common language for what he had lived, trying to find words that would carry the weight of it without breaking. He said he did not think of himself as a hermit. He said the word felt theatrical, like a costume. He said he had simply wanted to be alone, and that no one had ever offered him a compelling reason not to be, and that the woods had made that want possible, and so he had stayed. He acknowledged the harm he had caused, the hundreds of families who had lost the ease of their summers, the children's camp he had repeatedly robbed of supplies meant for disabled kids. He did not minimize it. He did not offer up a wound from his childhood that explained it. He said he had taken what he needed to survive, and that this was a moral failure he would carry, and that he was sorry, in the flat declarative way of a man who does not trade in performance. The district attorney, believing that imprisonment would be cruel in a way that served no one, offered a sentence of time served, a fine, a year of probation and mandatory counseling, and community service. Knight accepted. He walked out. And then, because of course he did not want to be found, he went to live with his mother in Albion, in the house he had left 30 years before, in the town where the road thins to gravel and the quiet is not peace, but agreement. He stopped returning Finkel's calls. He stopped replying to letters. At their final meeting, which Finkel drove to Maine specifically to request, Knight sat across from him with the same flat, direct gaze he had maintained in the jail and said, in words that could not be mistaken for anything other than what they were, "We are not friends." It was not cruelty. It was accuracy. Knight had given what he had to give. The exchange was over. What do you do with a man like this? What category holds him? He is not a hero in the way that word is usually meant, the person who endures and returns and becomes, by the grace of their endurance, an example. He did not want to be an example. He broke the law repeatedly for nearly 3 decades. He frightened people. He stole from a camp for disabled children. These are not footnotes. They are part of the weight the story carries, and you cannot move them to the margin and still tell the truth. And yet, there is something in what Christopher Knight did that strikes at something most of us carry and cannot name. The question is not whether his choice was right or wrong. The question is what it reveals about the gap, the space between the self that society requires you to be and the self that lives underneath that requirement, mute and enormous and waiting. Most of us never find out what lives there. We are too afraid, too responsible, too embedded in the systems of obligation that constitute a life, to look. We suspect the worst, that what lives beneath the performance of ourselves is nothing worth encountering. Or we suspect something harder still, that it is worth encountering, that it is real and entire and ours, and that we will never be brave or reckless enough to find out. Knight found out. He found out for 27 years in a hollow in the Maine woods, waking at 2:30 in the morning to pace a circle in the dark, surviving winter after winter on stolen crackers and borrowed silence, reading philosophy by lamplight in a camp that no one knew existed. He found the self that was left when everything else was stripped away, the career, the conversation, the network of mutual obligation we call community. The face we present to the world so that the world will allow us to remain in it. What he found there, he could not fully explain. Not even to Finkel, who pressed him for it across 9 hours of conversation with the genuine hunger of a man who has also lost something and needs to understand what was worth losing. Knight's answers were always slightly slanted from the question, as if the experience had given him knowledge that was real but not translatable, a language he had built alone, for which there were no dictionaries. He said the woods were beautiful. He said the silence was not absence, but a kind of presence. He said he did not miss people, but that he found them at the end more interesting than he had expected. He said the hardest thing about jail was not the noise or the food or the loss of freedom, but the relentless requirement to perform a self. To be Christopher Knight, the North Pond hermit, the curiosity, the answer to other people's questions, when he had spent 27 years being no one's answer to anything. He walked back into ordinary life carrying something that cannot be named, that cannot be transferred, that is his alone. He lives, as far as anyone knows, quietly, in Maine, near the woods. Here is what stays with you after the story ends and the details have settled into their right proportion. We live inside a world that tells us the self is a social product, that we are made by our relationships, our roles, our visibility to other people, that to be known is to exist, and to be unknown is to be less than real. Christopher Knight spent 27 years testing that claim at its absolute limit. And what he found, what the evidence of his survival, his coherence, his sharp and intact intelligence in that Kennebec County jail suggests, is that the self does not require an audience to remain whole. That beneath all the noise we make to prove we are here, there is something quieter, more durable, and harder to name. That it does not vanish in the dark. That it does not ask for permission. That it walks its circles at 2:30 in the morning in the coldest winter you can imagine, and waits and endures, and does not explain itself. You will never do what he did. You are not meant to. But somewhere inside you, in the part that has always suspected the performance was not the same thing as the person, you already know what he found.